There's a moment you probably remember. You're watching a show you love, week after week, and then one day a new face shows up on screen. Sometimes it works, most of the time it doesn't. And occasionally, that one character chips away at something so carefully built over years that the show is never quite the same again. Today we're counting down 9 characters that ruined your favorite sitcoms. Number 9, Chuck Cunningham, Happy Days, 1974 to 1984.
Messy. I've been thinking about getting a maid.
How about a salvage crew?
Hey, see, there we are, joking and getting along.
Happy Days premiered on ABC on January 15, 1974, and from the very beginning, it introduced viewers to the Cunningham family: Howard, Marion, their daughter Joni, their son Richie, and their eldest son, Chuck. Chuck Cunningham was a high school jock. Almost always seen bouncing a basketball, he had a big appetite and was generally in a hurry to get somewhere else. He was never the center of the show. His presence was more of a background detail than a story driver, but he was there, part of the household, part of the family. He was played by Gavin O'Herlihy in Season 1, then recast with Randolph Roberts for 2 episodes of Season 2, and then nothing. Chuck went upstairs one day and never came down. He didn't die. There was no goodbye scene, no mention of where he'd gone. He simply vanished, and the show moved forward as if he'd never existed. What makes the whole thing especially strange is that the Cunningham parents never mentioned him again either. There was no "Chuck's away at college" throwaway line, no reference, no acknowledgement of any kind. By the final season, Patriarch Howard referred to having 2 children, not 3. 2. Henry Winkler, who played Fonzie for all 11 seasons, eventually explained what had happened. Fonzie had grown into an unofficial older brother figure for Richie, and the writers simply couldn't write for 2 older brothers at the same time, so Chuck was quietly removed. But erasing a character entirely, not just writing him out, but acting as though he never existed at all, that's something different. There was no send-off, no acknowledgement, not even a passing joke about it. The family just got smaller, and no one said a word. Gavin O'Herlihy, the actor most associated with the role, later revealed in an interview that he had asked out of his contract himself. He didn't want to spend years grunting and bouncing a basketball once every couple of weeks. But even so, his departure explains only why O'Herlihy left, not why the character was completely written out of the Cunningham family's history without a single line of explanation. Chuck's disappearance became so legendary in television history that it gave rise to its own term, Chuck Cunningham Syndrome. That's the phrase critics and fans use whenever a character vanishes from a show without explanation, and the rest of the cast carries on as though that person was never there. It's a remarkable thing that a character who barely mattered to the show while he was on it left such a permanent mark on the way people talk about television long after he was gone. Number 8. 7. Married with Children, 1987 to 1997.
Here, your very first beer steins.
Wow, much cooler than a bike.
By the time Married with Children hit its 7th season in 1992, the show had built one of the most recognizable and tightly knit family dynamics on television. Al, Peggy, Kelly, and Bud Bundy were a unit, dysfunctional and chaotic in all the right ways. The show's appeal rested on the reckless, cynical chemistry between exactly those 4 characters. Audiences knew what they were getting, and they kept coming back for it. Then came 7. In the season 7 premiere, Peggy's cousin Zemus Wanker and his wife Ida May, played by Bobcat Goldthwait and Linda Blair, stopped by the Bundy home and quietly left their young son behind. The boy's name was 7, the result of a counting error by his parents who apparently skipped the number 6 when tallying up their children. He was played by child actor Shane Sweet and appeared in 12 episodes throughout that season. The problem was fundamental. 7 was a small, wide-eyed, sweet-natured child dropped into a show built entirely around adult dysfunction, cynicism, and humor that was deliberately unfamily-friendly. The Bundys didn't nurture. They didn't do heartwarming. That was the entire point, and it was the reason the show had lasted long enough to reach a 7th season. A cute kid in the middle of it all disrupted the one thing the show had built so carefully. Not everything needs to be the right kind of show for every character, and 7 simply required a different kind of show than the one he landed in. The timing also echoed what had happened a decade earlier on The Brady Bunch with Cousin Oliver, a child introduced in an attempt to recapture early energy as the existing cast grew older. The original Bundy kids, played by Christina Applegate and David Faustino, were now young adults. The cute kid slot was empty. The solution was to fill it. The result was the same as it had been in 1974. Audiences made their feelings known quickly, and the writers began pulling back Seven's role. His last proper appearance was in an episode called Peggy and the Pirates. After that, he was mentioned only once more, as a face on a missing child's milk carton during season 8. The show's own writers acknowledged his disappearance with a gag at his expense. Cast members Amanda Bearse and David Faustino later said in separate interviews that Seven was simply not a good fit for the show, and Bearse went further, saying that his introduction was the moment Married with Children officially jumped the shark. Number 7. Judy Winslow, Family Matters, 1989 to 1998.
Last time, I'm not Lois Lane, I'm Tina Turner.
Family Matters debuted on ABC in September 1989 as a spin-off of Perfect Strangers, centered on the Winslow family of Chicago. Parents Carl and Harriet, their son Eddie, and their 2 daughters, Laura and the youngest Judy. Judy Winslow, played by Jamie Foxworth, was a regular part of the household for the show's first 3 seasons. She wasn't the breakout character, but she was consistently present, a real member of the family, there at the dinner table, part of the household's daily rhythm. Then, midway through season 4, Judy stopped appearing. There was no explanation, no goodbye episode, no reference to where she'd gone or what had become of her. The family simply continued as though Judy had never been born. The unofficial explanation from the production side was straightforward enough. The show had become something it was never originally designed to be. When Jaleel White debuted as Steve Urkel in the 12th episode of Season 1, originally intended as a one-time guest appearance, the audience response was immediate and remarkable. Accounts from that first taping suggest the studio audience was visibly enthusiastic about the character in a way that caught the producer's attention. White was invited back, then back again, and by season 2, he was part of the main cast. Within a few seasons, he was not a supporting character anymore. He was the show. The nerdy neighbor who had shown up to take Laura to a school dance had, without anyone fully planning it, become the reason millions of people tuned in every Friday night. That kind of gravitational shift has real consequences. Characters who don't fit naturally into Urkel-centered storylines find less and less to do. Judy was the most vulnerable member of the household. She was young, she had fewer established storylines of her own, and her role could be scaled back without disrupting the show's new direction. The decision was made to quietly phase her out. In the seasons that followed, the Winslow family was consistently depicted as having 2 children, Eddie and Laura. Judy was never brought up, not once, not in a throwaway line, not in a scene around the kitchen table, not in a quiet moment between Carl and Harriet. She was simply gone, and the family around her closed the gap as though she had never filled it. Fans who'd watched from the beginning noticed, and they never quite forgot. Today, Judy Winslow is cited alongside Chuck Cunningham as one of the most prominent examples of a character who was erased rather than written out. A family member who ceased to exist not through any storyline decision, but through the quiet, unacknowledged choice to stop mentioning her name. Number 6. Warren Ferguson, The Andy Griffith Show, 1960 to 1968.
No, that's all right, Warren. I can manage. I can manage.
The Andy Griffith Show premiered on CBS in October 1960 and over 5 seasons became one of the most beloved sitcoms in American television history. Much of that was because of the extraordinary chemistry between Andy Taylor and his deputy, Barney Fife, played by Don Knotts. Barney was lovable in his incompetence, earnest, sensitive, and always rooting for himself even when he failed spectacularly. He and Andy were one of the great comedic partnerships the medium ever produced. Knotts won 5 Emmy Awards for the role. The real story behind Knotts' departure in 1965 is worth knowing because it makes the whole situation more complicated. Griffith had told Knotts on multiple occasions that he planned to end the show after 5 seasons. Taking that at face value, Knotts signed a 5-year film deal with Universal Pictures to protect his career, and then Griffith changed his mind and decided to continue. By the time that news arrived, Knotts was already committed elsewhere. He had no choice but to leave, even though neither man had intended for things to end that way. The show brought in comedian Jack Burns to play a replacement deputy, Warren Ferguson. Warren arrived in season 6 and was clearly designed to fill the comedic void Barney had left behind. He even had some of Barney's qualities on the surface. He was dedicated, he was bumbling, he made mistakes. But where Barney was endearing in his flaws, sincere, self-important, and fundamentally lovable, Warren came across as argumentative, know-it-all, and harder to root for. His energy didn't match Mayberry's rhythms. The gentle, unhurried small-town atmosphere that the show had spent 5 years carefully building sat uncomfortably alongside Warren's more combative approach. Andy Griffith himself later reflected on those episodes honestly. He said the whole cast was uncomfortable throughout Warren's run, and he laid the blame not on Burns, but on the situation itself. "It wasn't Jack's fault," Griffith said. "It was our fault." That's a gracious admission, and probably an accurate one. No performer could have fully succeeded in that position. Replacing Barney Fife wasn't a casting problem. It was a structural impossibility. Warren appeared in only 11 episodes of season 6 before being quietly dropped, again without explanation. Don Knotts returned for guest appearances in later seasons, and the show continued to perform well. It actually finished its final season in 1967-68 as the #1 show on all of American television. But the Warren-Ferguson stretch remains the most awkward and least fondly remembered period in the show's long run. Number 5. Randy Pearson, That 70s Show, 1998 to 2006.
Yeah. Me and Fez will be in the El Camino with Hyde. You pull us over, arrest us, and bring us to the party in a police car. No.
That 70s Show ran for 8 seasons on Fox, following a group of teenagers in the fictional town of Point Place, Wisconsin, through the late 1970s. The ensemble had spent 7 seasons developing one of the tightest comedic dynamics on television. Eric, Donna, Hyde, Kelso, Jackie, and Fez, each with distinct personalities that clicked against each other in specific, carefully established ways. By the end of season 7, the show had a significant problem. Topher Grace, who played Eric Foreman, the group's sardonic, self-deprecating center, had left to pursue a film career, most notably a role in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3. Ashton Kutcher, who played the lovably dim Kelso, also departed. Losing 2 of 6 core cast members at once was a serious blow, and the production team needed to find a way forward. Their answer was Randy Pearson, played by Josh Myers, the younger brother of late-night host Seth Meyers. Randy was introduced in the 2nd episode of season 8 as a new employee at Hyde's record store. He became a love interest for Donna and was written as a kind of composite, laid back and likable like Eric, but with Kelso's natural ease with people. Producers had originally planned to cast Myers as a recast Eric, with an in-universe explanation that Africa had changed him. They thought better of it and created Randy as a new character instead. It was the right instinct, but it didn't solve the underlying problem. The problem was that the qualities that made Eric and Kelso so compelling to watch were their specific flaws and vulnerabilities. Eric's crushing insecurity, Kelso's spectacular and affectionate obliviousness. Randy had none of those edges. He was pleasant, capable, and agreeable, which made him thorough but unremarkable television. Without the friction that comes from a character's specific weaknesses, there was very little comedy to build around him. His relationship with Donna felt unconvincing, particularly after 7 seasons of carefully built, slow-burn tension between Donna and Eric. Fans knew what they had watched build up over years, and they knew this wasn't it. The show's ratings fell from 7.4 million viewers in season 7 to 6.8 million in season 8, the steepest single-season decline the show ever experienced. It was canceled at the end of that season. Randy barely appeared in the series finale. He was not present at the Foreman's New Year's Eve party in the final episode. He has never been referenced in That 90s Show, the Netflix spin-off that brought back nearly the entire original cast. His image was even edited out of some promotional materials for the original series. It's as close to an official verdict as television ever delivers. Number 4. Sam McKinney, Different Strokes, 1978 to 1986.
What cigarettes, Pearl?
Who's been smoking?
Not me.
Different Strokes premiered on NBC in November 1978 and became a genuine phenomenon, built almost entirely around the persona and timing of Gary Coleman as Arnold Jackson. Coleman was extraordinary, a physically small child with an adult's wit and precision, and his exchanges with the adults around him gave the show its heartbeat. For most of its run, the series was a consistent rating success, and Coleman himself became one of the most recognizable child actors of his generation. By the sixth season in 1984, however, the ratings were beginning to soften. Coleman was now a teenager, and the adorable kid dynamic that had driven so much of the show's early appeal was becoming harder to sustain in the same way. The producer's solution was to bring in a new, younger child, Sam McKinney, played by red-headed 8-year-old Danny Cooksey. Sam arrived as the son of Philip Drummond's new wife, Maggie, making him Arnold's new stepbrother and on-screen sidekick. The logic was familiar by now. It was the same logic that had produced Cousin Oliver on The Brady Bunch a decade earlier, and Seven on Married with Children would follow the same blueprint 8 years later. Bring in a younger child when the existing cast has outgrown the role that originally drew audiences in. Hope it works again the way it worked the first time. It almost never does. The charm of a show's early years isn't simply a function of having a cute kid on screen. It's about specific personalities, lived-in relationships, and the trust audiences have built through years with particular characters. A new child doesn't replicate any of that. They arrive without history, without the established dynamics, and without the time it takes to earn genuine affection. Sam appeared in the final 3 seasons of Different Strokes. Cooksey himself did what he was asked to do and went on to a solid career afterward. He had a memorable small role in Terminator 2 and became well known to a new generation through his years on Nickelodeon's Salute Your Shorts. None of that was the character's fault, but his arrival, like so many before and after him, was widely read by audiences as a sign that the show had run out of better ideas. Different Strokes ended in 1986. Sam McKinney was there for all 3 of its final seasons and for the slow decline that accompanied them. Number 3. Cousin Oliver, The Brady Bunch, 1969 to 1974.
Yeah, because it's a big secret.
Oliver, I told you to play it cool.
What do you mean? I didn't say anything about the FBI man coming over.
If there is one character who defined the concept of a sitcom sabotaging itself with a late-season addition, it is Cousin Oliver, to the point where television writers and critics named the phenomenon after him. The Brady Bunch had been on the air since September 1969, and by its 5th season, the youngest of the 6 Brady kids, Cindy and Bobby, were 12 years old. The cute kid appeal that had been central to the show's early identity was fading naturally as the cast grew up. Paramount president Doug Kramer made the call to bring in a younger child to recapture that energy. And so, on January 25th, 1974, 9-year-old Robbie Rist appeared on screen as Oliver Tyler, described on the show as Carol Brady's nephew, sent to live with the family while his parents were in South America on an archaeological dig. Oliver was accident-prone and well-meaning, a jinx figure who caused mishaps wherever he went. But audiences felt the calculation behind him. He wasn't a natural addition to the family's story. He was an attempt to reset the show's emotional clock in a cast that had already spent 5 years becoming something specific. A new child inserted at the very end of a show's run simply couldn't earn the same emotional weight through proximity and time that the other characters had built up across years of episodes. Cousin Oliver appeared in the final 6 episodes of The Brady Bunch. The show was canceled shortly after. The series was already struggling before Oliver arrived, and it's not entirely fair to place all the blame on his shoulders. The show had been declining for reasons that went beyond a single casting decision, but his introduction became the defining symbol of that decline. It crystallized in one character everything that happens when a show tries to turn back the clock rather than honestly reckon with where it is. So much so that the term Cousin Oliver syndrome was coined directly from his story. It's the phrase used to this day whenever a late-season child character is introduced to a struggling show in a bid to restore the energy of earlier seasons. Robbie Rist, the actor who played Oliver, has been gracious about the whole thing over the years. He understood the situation from the start, and years later, when he appeared alongside the Brady Bunch cast on a charity episode of The Weakest Link, he introduced himself with a single line that said everything: "I hope I don't kill this show too." Number 2. Walden Schmidt, 2.5 Men, 2003 to 2015. Two and a Half Men ran for 12 seasons on CBS, but the version most people remember, the one that defined the show, was its first 8. Those seasons were built around the dynamic between Charlie Harper and his brother Alan. Charlie, played by Charlie Sheen, was a wealthy, self-indulgent jingle writer with a Malibu beach house and a gift for making selfishness entertaining. Alan, played by John Cryer, was the perpetually unlucky, by-the-book chiropractor who moved in under temporary circumstances and never left. Their contrast, one man who had everything and squandered it, one who deserved better and never got it, was the engine of the show. In March 2011, after a very public falling out between Sheen and creator Chuck Lorre, Sheen was fired. His verbal attacks on Lorre in a radio interview led CBS and Warner Brothers to terminate his contract on March 7, 2011. The remaining episodes of Season 8 were scrapped. On May 13, 2011, it was announced that Ashton Kutcher would join the show as a new character, Walden Schmidt, described as an internet billionaire with a broken heart. The Season 9 premiere, which aired September 19, 2011, drew 28.74 million viewers, the most watched episode in the show's history, built almost entirely on curiosity about how the transition would be handled. Walden was introduced on the beach behind the Malibu house. Suicidal after his divorce, he stumbled into Alan's life and bought the property. The setup was clever enough in theory, but where Charlie Harper had been sardonic, boundary-free, and funny in his dysfunction, Walden was sweet, naive, and eager. The specific friction that had driven 8 seasons of comedy, the grinding contrast between two completely incompatible brothers stuck together, was gone. Walden and Alan got along. There was no real tension to mine. The show ran 4 more seasons and ended on February 19, 2015. By then, viewership had declined sharply from the Sheen years, and critical consensus held that the show had outlasted the dynamic that made it work. Kutcher himself later acknowledged that the character he wound up playing wasn't quite the one he'd originally agreed to take on. In an interview on the WTF with Mark Maron podcast, he noted the character had undergone significant changes between the initial pitch and what appeared on screen. It's a candid admission from someone who was, ultimately, trying to do a genuinely difficult thing: step into a decade-long show built around someone else entirely, with a live audience that knew the difference and an impossible standard to meet from his very first scene. Number 1. Scrappy-Doo, Scooby-Doo, 1969 to present.
Wow, a real mule.
All this talk of creatures and saucers is just...
No list of characters that changed a beloved show for the worse would be complete without Scrappy-Doo. Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Premiered on CBS in September 1969, and over the course of the early 1970s became one of the defining fixtures of Saturday morning television. The mystery-solving gang, Scooby, Shaggy, Fred, Daphne, and Velma, built a specific, recognizable chemistry over years of episodes. Their comedy was rooted in cowardice, bumbling, and an almost ritualistic cycle of getting scared and getting through it anyway. Audiences, especially kids, but honestly adults too, knew exactly what they were getting, and they kept coming back for it. The formula was simple, and it worked beautifully. By 1979, however, after a decade on the air in various forms, ratings had begun to fall. Hanna-Barbera was facing the possibility of losing the franchise altogether, and they were looking for something to shake things up. Their answer arrived in September 1979 with Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo, the introduction of Scooby's young nephew, Scrappy-Doo, voiced by Lenny Weinrib. Scrappy was everything the rest of the gang was not. He was loud, combative, and aggressively confrontational, constantly rushing toward danger rather than away from it. His whole personality was built around wanting to fight his way through every situation. Where the show's original comedy had come from its characters' cowardice and their reluctant, stumbling heroism, Scrappy pushed in the opposite direction entirely. The contrast wasn't entertaining or dynamic. To the fans who had been watching since the beginning, it felt like a completely different show had swallowed the one they loved. There's an honest argument to be made that Scrappy bought the franchise time it might not otherwise have had. Viewership numbers held in the short term, and Hanna-Barbera avoided cancellation. In that narrow sense, the addition can be called a business success, but the long-term verdict among audiences was clear, and it held firm for decades. Scrappy-Doo became shorthand for exactly the kind of creative miscalculation he represented: a loud, forced character brought in to chase a younger demographic rather than serve what the show had actually built. The broader culture caught up to that verdict in a way that rarely happens so openly. The Simpsons Simpsons directly parodied the phenomenon when Itchy and Scratchy, the cartoon within a cartoon, brought in a new dog character named Poochie to boost ratings. Poochie was transparently ridiculous, and the joke worked because the audience immediately recognized what it was pointing at. Scrappy had become the symbol of the thing. He was no longer just a character who hadn't worked. He was the example everyone reached for whenever a show stopped trusting what made it great and started chasing something it could no longer be. He is still remembered today, almost entirely for the wrong reasons. Every show on this list had something real going for it before things went sideways. The Brady Bunch had warmth, Happy Days had nostalgia, 2.5 Men had a comedic engine that genuinely worked for 8 years, Different Strokes had Gary Coleman, and the audiences who loved those shows noticed, sometimes within the first episode, when something fundamental had shifted. What all 9 of these characters have in common is that they were brought in by people who understood their shows well enough to know something was wrong, but reached for the wrong solution. Audiences don't just love a show because of its premise. They love it because of specific people, specific dynamics, specific chemistry that built up gradually over time. You can't manufacture that with a casting announcement, and you can't replace it with a newer, younger version of something that worked years earlier. Not every character on this list ended the show they were on. Some just left a mark, but all 9 of them are reminders of what happens when a creative team tries to fix something by adding to it, when what the audience actually needed was for someone to trust what was already there, and to know when to let a good thing end with its dignity intact. If this brought back some memories, good or bad, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. There are a lot more stories from the history of television worth talking about, and we're just getting started.